Good morning and welcome back to News and Views with Salam Media. And a reminder that this hour is brought to you by African Muslims Agency. Fiz Imran Chunara, Personal Excellence Mentor and CEO of African Muslims Agency. Delighted to welcome you back. Now, today, I have a very special guest with us today, a comrade, a friend, and a prolific scholar, author, and survivor of the genocide in Palestine from Gaza, Professor Haidar Eid. Haidar, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Comrade Joe. It's an honor to be here with you on Salam Media.
It's such an honor to have you here. Now, there's so much I want to talk to you about, but I would like to begin with your book, which I will say was my favorite book of 2025. I always make a list, and this was my top book of 2025. It is called Banging on the Walls of the Tank,
Yes.
Dispatches from Gaza. And I just want to read this. It's
Sure.
a quote from the book,
Sure.
and it's at the beginning, and it says, "This book is both personal and political. My testimony of being a Palestinian refugee residing in what has been called the largest open-air prison on earth. But it is also a voice from within offering a way out of the manufactured quagmire in Palestine." Now, I think that's a really powerful opening. And I think what's always really quite amazing about you is that you are able to kind of hold the absolute devastation with a promise of a way out. So can you tell us, starting from this point, tell us a little bit about, I know you've been writing these essays for many, many years. Tell us a little bit about the book and where it came from and how you managed to hold this kind of hope and devastation at the same time.
No, that's a brilliant question. Thank you so much, Joe. You know that I am a fan of and a disciple of the late Italian philosopher, thinker, activist, freedom fighter, Marxist intellectual, in fact, Antonio Gramsci. And one of my mottos in life is taken actually from Antonio Gramsci's life and writings, in which he talks about the pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will. So in a way, it's a combination. The other person that I am in love with, I'm still in love with, in spite of so many political and ideological differences I had with him, is the late Palestinian writer, communist activist, Palestinian citizen of apartheid Israel, Emil Habibi, who was also the editor of Al-Ittihad, the mouthpiece of the Israeli Communist Party. And one of his most well-known, actually, novels was The Piss Optimistic. Yeah, and which is a combination of pessimism and optimism. And also Edward Said's definition of worldliness, of writers being within and without the world. And my world, my universe, has always been Gaza. And this is why, as you noticed in the book itself, I consider Gaza to be the universe, the center of the universe. It's my universe, it is the center of the universe. And this has been proven lately with what is going on right now in Lebanon, Syria, and especially with the criminal war taking place against the people of Iran. So this is a combination, actually, of, I would say it's a micro-macro dialectic, micro-macro relationship. My personal story, being a refugee, born to refugee parents in the Nusayrat refugee camps in the Gaza Strip, at the same time being engaged in all political life in Gaza, the West Bank, in 1948 in Palestine. But then what came to my mind when I thought about this book, and I must admit, I started thinking about this book only after arriving in South Africa, because if you remember, I had another book coming out here in South Africa, which is purely political, theoretical and political. And therefore, some people might find it a little bit dry.
Just for our listeners,
Yes.
Decolonizing the Palestinian Mind. So
That's
if
correct.
you want to read that, that's what it's called. Carry on.
That's correct. Decolonizing the Palestinian mind. But and I decided to launch it as soon as I arrived in South Africa. But then I kept thinking about, I had this discussion with comrades, and this has been on my mind for a while, actually. How many books have been written about Gaza by native Gazans? By Gazans themselves. I know there were so many books written by people from outside Gaza, most of whom were, foreigners, but even Palestinians who did not live in Gaza itself. And I can't count the books written about Gaza by Gazans on my hand, my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can just, I'm thinking about names now. But how many books have been written? I mean, very, very few. You ask yourself, how many books have I read, about Gaza written by Gazans who have been through almost everything? When I decided to go back to after getting my PhD degree from University of Johannesburg in 2000, and it was a time of so-called peace, part of the peace industry, at the time being marketed to the world, that there is peace between the two parties, the colonizer and the colonized,
the both side of
the both
sides of arms.
Absolutely. And at the time they were talking about a safe passage between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. It is impossible, and we'll talk about this, to establish an independent Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank because of the settlements, etc. But at the time, they were talking about it. And unfortunately, there was false hope, which was part, as I argue, in decolonizing the Palestinian mind, part of the false consciousness that they decided to spread in Palestine. In fact, when the Oslo Accords were signed back in 1993, on the White House lawn, so many people supported it. Not everybody was like Edward Said. Not everybody was like George Habash, the secretary, the late.
I think you call them Oslo apologists. Is that's
correct? That's why. Actually, let me be honest with you.
Before you be honest with me,
sure.
Can I would love you to be honest with me right now, but we're going to have a short break, and then we'll be back to continue this fascinating conversation. You're on News and Views. We'll see you shortly.
Across Sudan, starvation is tightening its grip. With rising food prices and widespread malnutrition, 8.7 million people are now facing emergency or famine-level hunger. As the conflict intensifies and aid routes narrow, families in Sudan are running out of options and time. The Al Imdad Foundation is delivering life-saving humanitarian aid to those most at risk. Stand with Sudan. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
With Ashraful Eid this Ramadan, your zakat changes lives. It feeds families facing hunger, restores dignity to those in need, and brings hope where it is needed most. From food relief to essential support, your zakah reaches communities with care, transparency, and impact. Give with confidence, give with trust. Make your zakah count this Ramadan. Give your zakah to Ashraful Eid and help change lives today.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, Use the black seed, for indeed it is a cure for every disease except death. This Ramadan, honor that guidance. Tip black seed supports your blood sugar during fasting, boosts immunity, sustains your energy from suhoor to iftar. Available at leading pharmacies. Tip black seed, your golden drop every day.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
This Ramadan, please consider donating to the Islamic Dawah movement. For over 45 years, IDM has built over 80 masjids and distributed more than 160,000 Qurans in 8 local languages. IDM has installed over 250 boreholes and water wells. Over 1,000 children are fed daily, building strong Muslim communities in disadvantaged areas.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to News and Views on Salam Media. I am so honored to have with us today author, survivor of genocide, literary scholar, researcher at Nelson Mandela University, and especially recent author of Banging on the Walls of the Tank, Dispatches from Gaza, Professor Haidar Eid. And we've just been having this really interesting conversation.
Sure.
And I want to pick up on something that you've said about Oslo, but also about the kind of idea of two independent states,
Yes.
which I believe you refer to in the book as a two-prison solution. Can you tell us more? Because I think, for a long time, that was considered kind of the more democratic, the more kind of just approach. So can you tell us about the two-prison solution and your views on that?
Sure. Actually, in decolonizing the Palestinian mind, I take the line taken by Edward Said. If you remember, in 1993, when the Oslo Accords were signed, he came up with a fantastic piece at the time. You can find it on the London Review of Books called "The Morning After," in which he predicted, in fact, what was going to happen. That Israel was not serious about finding a just solution to the Palestinian question. So the question then was, what is a just solution to the Palestinian question? What was suggested by the so-called international community, i.e. the colonial West, headed by the United States of America at the time, Bill Clinton and his gang, is to let the Palestinians believe that they can have an independent Palestinian state. And what they had in their mind at the time, and this is what Edward Said had to say, was in fact less than a Bantustan. Not even a Bantustan, the infamous Bantustans of South Africa. And Arafat believed that. He thought that he could actually have, seriously, he believed that he could have an independent Palestinian state by 1999, because he was promised by the Americans. Edward Said at the time said, no, they will not offer us an independent Palestinian state because, and that was my argument also in decolonizing the Palestinian mind, because think about it, the number of Israeli settlers in the Gaza Strip at the time and the West Bank, 1993, was 193,000, both in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Now the number of settlers, now as we are speaking right now, Joe, has risen to 800,000 in the West Bank. And here, I don't like to call them settlements. I like to call them colonies. And people who have been to the West Bank know what I'm talking about. We're talking about big towns, big cities. Where are these 800 illegal colonists are going after the establishment of a sovereign, independent Palestinian state on only 22% of historic Palestine. That is to say, in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. That's number one. Number two, Israel was in fact erecting at the time, if you remember, a horrific, monstrous apartheid wall, separating. Notice even the word apartheid wall, there is an argument that we shouldn't use the word apartheid because it's not separating Palestinians from Israelis only. It is separating Palestinians from Palestinians in the heart of the West Bank. Number three, Israel was, implementing the idea of expanding the so-called Greater Jerusalem, eating up more than 20% of the West Bank. So nothing is left of the West Bank, nothing at all. So that is the practical side about the impossibility of establishing an independent Palestinian state. But what is the Palestinian question? If you ask me, and I'm going to quote my late mother, Haidar Eid, illiterate but an intellectual.
Of course.
Gramsci says all men and women are philosophers and intellectuals. My mother was an intellectual, an illiterate intellectual, brilliant woman. And then I remember when the Oslo Accords were signed, I said to her, and she said, why is everybody celebrating? I said, because there is a deal between the Israelis and Palestinians signed on the lawn of the White House. She says, oh, does that mean that I am going back tomorrow to Zarnuqa? The village from which we were together with other Zarnuqis ethnically cleansed in 1948. My point is that if the Palestinian question is not the right of our return, then what it is. The Oslo Accord has nothing whatsoever to say about the right of return. Number three, there are 1.4 million Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel treated as third, if not fourth class citizens in Israel. What does the Oslo Accord say about them? So here you have, it is impossible to have an independent Palestinian state. And the reason that I add, as you said, if you notice in the book, I call it the racist two-state solution. What does it mean when you separate two peoples based on their ethno-religious identities? You, amongst other old people in South Africa, of all people, you know what that means. Nelson Mandela never accepted a solution like this. And this is why Said and, others came up with this idea. It was not a new idea. It's an old new idea of a secular democratic state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, the one-state solution.
I'm sorry, are you?
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I'm done. Yes.
So this, I think this is, and I also want to highlight of many of your outputs is Return to Zarnuqa, your film?
That's the documentary.
The documentary.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really powerful idea around reminding us that it's actually, the logic of the Nakba is fragmentation, and that you are kind of fragmenting the land, the people, the ways of thinking, and I'm grateful to you for sharing that with us. Before we wrap up, I think one of the things that South Africans, there's this long-standing support for the Palestinian cause, both from South African ordinary people and from the government, ICJ case, etc. I know you have played an instrumental role in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement in PACB, I believe one of the founding members. Can you tell us what ordinary South Africans can be doing to kind of to work against both this apartheid set in a colonial state, this kind of 800,000 settlers in the West Bank, the Holocaust, the genocide that's happening in Gaza. What can South Africans do? What is you talk about the way out of the quagmire. How can South Africans be in solidarity?
That's an excellent question. And, I'm glad that, I'm talking to a South African and I'm talking to a South African audience. What did South Africans expected the international community to do in the 60s, 70s, and 80s of last century? In the late 1950s, I think 1958 or 59, I'm not sure, a handful of ANC, SAP activists had a meeting in London, and then they came up with a solution. They said, let's call on the international community to boycott the apartheid regime until it complies with international law. That's all we wanted. You said, well, all liberal democracies are arguing for, rule of law after the Second World War. So let's call on the international community to implement international law. Apartheid is a crime against humanity. All international human rights organizations, from Amnesty International to Human Rights Watch to even Israel's B'Tselem, are calling Israel an apartheid state. What we want ordinary people. We want the international community. We want governments that claim to be following international law, abiding by law, to boycott apartheid Israel the same way the international community boycotted the apartheid regime of South Africa, divest from it, and not only from Israel, but also from international companies benefiting from war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by genocidal Israel. And number three, we want the international community to impose sanctions against apartheid Israel until it complies with international law. And I can tell you, and I can see that this is the beginning of the end of the apartheid project in historic Palestine. And we think that especially South African citizens have a historical and moral duty to exert as much pressure on their government to sever all its diplomatic ties with apartheid Israel. What does the post-apartheid flag doing fluttering in the skies of Tel Aviv? How come? I mean, we cannot fathom how post-apartheid South Africa still has diplomatic ties with apartheid Israel. How on earth does South Africa allow itself to be the first exporter of coal to genocidal Israel, in fact, fueling genocide in Palestine?
I think that's such an important point. And I actually remember, as you're talking, revolutionary Leila Khaled came to South Africa. We hosted her at South African Jews for a Free Palestine. This was October 2023. And I remember her saying, you have to remove the embassies. You have to remove the ambassadors. And I think that's a very important point. And I think to close, you make this point in your book that Israel is on the verge of collapse. And I think, listening to you today, and I hope that our listeners can go away with this, is there is a moment of hope, right? We are seeing Israel taking quite a beating in the US-Israel war on Iran. We are seeing quite a lot of damage being caused there. We are seeing splits and rifts within Israeli society. And so I think this point that you drive home about resistance in many forms, including a consumer boycott, sanctions, is ever so important. Thank you so much, Professor Eid. Haidar Eid, genocide survivor, brilliant literary scholar, intellectual, and researcher with Nelson Mandela University. Thank you for joining us on News and Views, listeners, friends, viewers. And please do come back tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.